We all know the story of Cinderella, the glass slipper, the happily ever after. But what if that happily ever after was a carefully constructed facade? What if the real story was one of simmering resentment, a princess haunted by the ghosts of her past? Prepare to shatter everything you thought you knew about this timeless tale. She had become the fairest of them all, or so the kingdom believed. Every morning, she woke up before the sun, her face a canvas of porcelain skin and raven hair cascading down her back like a silken waterfall. Her eyes, though they betrayed her, they held a hollowness that no amount of rouge could ever cover up. It was a secret abyss that stared back at you, challenging you to peer into its dark depths and confront the haunting truth. For behind those heavy lids resided the ghost of Ella, the girl who once dreamed of a life beyond the castle walls. Now Princess Ella, for that's what she was called since the magical night of the royal ball, lived a life of gilded cages and suffocating smiles. She attended banquets where laughter echoed against the vaulted ceilings, but her own mirth sounded like a foreign language. Every time the king or queen offered her a kind word or the prince a tender smile, she felt a hollow echo within her chest. It was a constant reminder of the life she'd left behind, the dreams she'd abandoned, and most hauntingly, the shadow of the resentment that had taken root within her soul. Her days were filled with embroidery and etiquette lessons, nights with endless balls and parties. Yet there was an emptiness that gnawed at her, a void that no amount of silks or jewels could fill. The shadow grew, whispering insidious doubts. Was this really her happily ever after? Hadn't she traded her old life of drudgery for a new life of gilded misery? But let's go back to the beginning. To understand how a girl so full of hope and sunshine could transform into a woman, harboring such bitterness and regret, we have to rewind to the days before the ball, before the prince, before the life that turned out to be a gilded cage. Back then, she was just Cinderella. She woke up before dawn, not to the melodic trill of birds, but to the cacophony of her stepsisters shrieking for more jam on their toast. Her day was a monotonous tune of scrubbing floors, polishing shoes, and darning clothes, all while enduring the snickers and jabs of her stepsisters and the cold indifference of her stepmother. The turning point came with the invitation to the royal ball. For once, Cinderella dared to dream of escaping her drudgery, of being more than just the house's servant. The dress was a beautiful ruse, a distraction from the harsh reality that awaited her once the clock struck 12. And who could have guessed that the fairy godmother was merely an extension of that illusion, a figment of imagination, or perhaps a wish too far? Because what did the fairy godmother really do? She whisked Cinderella away to the ball, granting her a night of make-believe and a glimpse of something more. But she didn't address the festering wounds of years of abuse. She didn't mend the fractured pieces of Cinderella's spirit. In fact, she inadvertently prolonged Cinderella's suffering by giving her a taste of freedom, a memory that would only serve to highlight the captivity that awaited her return. For Cinderella's story wasn't just about a lost slipper or a handsome prince. It was a story about the weight of expectations, the burden of carrying a kingdom's hopes on her shoulders. After the ball, she became the talk of the kingdom. Everyone lauded her grace, her beauty, her kindness. But who saw the cracks in her composure? Who noticed the tremble in her hands, the fleeting shadows of pain in her eyes? In this new life, she couldn't even cry. Each stifled sob, each swallowed tear, added another layer of grime to the bars of her gilded cage. With every public appearance, with every charitable act, she was applauded. But behind closed doors, she crumbled. She missed her old life, not because it was easier, but because it was real. It was real pain, real tears, real human connection. Here, everything was artificial, a performance. And then came the prince, a charming distraction, a momentary respite from the suffocating perfection. But even he couldn't see beyond the mask that she wore so well. He married her not because he loved her, not because he saw her, but because she represented something ethereal, something untouchable. And she played her part flawlessly, giving the kingdom their perfect princess. But what did it cost her? Oh, it cost her everything. Her name, Her identity, her past, her innocence, her very soul. She buried her past deep within her, hoping it would stay there, hoping that she could move on. But buried things have a way of surfacing, don't they? And Cinderella found that out the hard way. Now, years into her marriage, the resentment was a living, breathing thing inside her, a constant companion that whispered in her ear, reminding her that she was nothing more than a trophy wife, a prize to be paraded around, admired, envied, but never truly seen. She walked through the palace corridors, surrounded by paintings of her ancestors, women whose eyes seemed to bore into her, judging her, daring her to break the illusion, to confess the charade that they all knew she was a part of. The irony was not lost on her. These women, these icons of the kingdom, had once been young girls with dreams and aspirations, just like her. Yet now they were trapped in these portraits, reduced to mere decorative accessories of the palace. One day, Rum family arrived for a visit. Cinderella's stepsisters and her mother, Lady Tremaine, descended upon the palace like a flock of crows, cawing loudly and demanding attention. As always, they were the center of attention. Cinderella faded into the background, a mere footnote in her own life story. She watched as her stepsisters curtsied before the king and queen, their voices like nails on a chalkboard grating against her nerves. She saw the admiration in her mother's eyes, not for Cinderella, but for the power and status she had attained. That evening, after the Tremaines had departed, Cinderella found herself alone in her room. She gazed at her reflection in a vanity mirror, hardly recognizing the stranger staring back at her. Porcelain skin, raven hair, yes. But the eyes, those haunting pools of sadness, they betrayed her. They spoke of sleepless nights, of stifled sobs, and the heavy cloak of resentment she now wore like a second skin. Years of bottled emotions finally overflowed, spilling from her eyes like a dam had broken. It wasn't just the Tremaines' visit that triggered this torrent of grief. It was the culmination of a lifetime of buried feelings, of sacrifices made and dreams deferred. As she cried, a knock echoed in the stillness of the room. The door opened and in stepped the prince, his face etched with concern. But what could he say? What could he do? He had loved the girl in the tower, the girl he had married, not the woman he now saw before him, broken and defeated. She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. For a moment, he saw not a princess, but a girl who looked back at him with a mixture of fear and loathing. That look shattered something in his heart, but he couldn't understand why. That night he didn't touch her. They lay in the grand four-poster bed, two figures enveloped in darkness, each lost in their own abyss of despair. She cried herself to sleep, her dreams filled with images of the past, of cruel words, and callous laughter echoing in her ears. When morning came, she woke up feeling drained, both in body and spirit. The encounter with her stepfamily had been a catalyst, but the pain she harbored ran deeper, much deeper. She went through the motions of the day, attending to her duties, meeting with visiting dignitaries, all the while knowing that none of them truly saw her, not really. They saw the princess, the symbol of the kingdom's prosperity, not Cinderella, the woman who was slowly losing her sanity. Each day that passed, the echoes of the past grew louder. She started seeing her stepsisters in the palace maids, hearing her mother's voice in the queen's chiding tones. The grand castle, once a symbol of her supposed happily ever after, now felt like a prison, its high walls mocking her, its ornate gates taunting her with a life she could no longer access. She began locking herself in her room, seeking solace in books, poring over tales of distant lands and daring adventures, anything to escape the suffocating reality that had become her life. One day, she found an old, worn copy of Cinderella, the story of the girl who went to the ball and found her prince charming. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. How ironic that the story had ended with the words, "And they lived happily ever after," if only it were true. Her story had turned into a twisted mockery of the original. Her happily ever after had become a living hell. She tossed the book aside, the finality of the story mirroring the dead end she felt her life had become. Outside, the sounds of the kingdom bustled, oblivious to the turmoil raging within the castle walls. But how long could she keep it hidden? How long could she pretend to be the picture-perfect princess when behind closed doors she was crumbling to dust?